So thank you for joining. I know that the topic of making Aliyah is on all of our minds since literally the day after Purim. The day after Purim, our world's turned over upside down with the coronavirus. Recently, we have experienced instability in the United States of America, as other countries have in the past, similar to France, and Aliyah is on our minds. The goal of this very short program is to make an introduction to the organization Nefesh BeNefesh and Mr. Eli or Eli Bialik, and to give a very broad overview to some of the things to think about if you are considering Aliyah in any form. I'm excited to host this program right after what Rabbi Joey Mizrahi said, and the class that Rabbi Nahaliel Salavian gave previously. I plan personally to organize more events in order to make sure that we don't only talk about the broad issues, but to get into more of the details, such as people who want to make investments in the land of Israel and real estate and look for jobs. My email is rabbimoseshaber@gmail.com, rabbimoseshaber@gmail.com. But there are also many, many fellow Syrian Jews who already made Aliyah, who are collaborating today to put up a website, hopefully in a few months, called synisrael.com. And the point of synisrael.com is to be maybe a social network in order to support people who have questions about Israel. I also want to thank Mr. Michael Hidary for introducing me to Eli Bialik and Nefesh BeNefesh, who is on with us now. Happens to be that all the people in Israel have already broken their fast while we're still suffering through it. I would like to introduce now Mr. Eli Bialik. He is the municipal liaison and community advisor for Nefesh BeNefesh. He is a resident of Ramat Bet Shemesh. Actually, he is very, very familiar with the Syrian community. He is a student of the elementary and high school of Hillel School in Deal, and he lived in Bradley, New Jersey. He was also a teacher in Yeshiva of Frappus, third grade. So if I could see Eli's picture, so I could talk to him directly.
I'm right here. I can hear you.
Here we go. Okay. So Eli, can you tell us a little bit about what Nefesh BeNefesh does and doesn't do, and also specifically about your role in Nefesh BeNefesh? And thank you for the map behind you.
So thank you for inviting me. I think it's a tremendous zchut to be talking about Aliyah. Here for us, it's immediately after Tish'a BeAb, and for all of you in the United States, that it's still during this very, very important day. So Nefesh BeNefesh actually is an organization that was created out of Tsar. During the second Intifada, there was a terrorist attack, and there were many Jews who were killed. One of them was the nephew of Rabbi Yehoshua Fass, who was a rabbi in Boca Raton, Florida, who had already decided that he wants to make Aliyah, but because of what happened, what was happening at that time in Eretz Yisrael, decided to rent a plane and invite other people to come with him on Aliyah at that time, and to sort of make a public statement that the Jewish response to terror is by building Eretz Yisrael. And that is how the organization started in 2002. So Nefesh BeNefesh is a private organization that promotes and facilitates Aliyah. We provide Aliyah services, and we work in conjunction with the Jewish Agency for Israel, the Sochnut HaYehudit, where the Sochnut is responsible in determining eligibility for making Aliyah under the Israeli law of return, Chok HaShvut. So if anybody's not familiar with the historical background of Chok HaShvut, the law of return is based on the Nazi Nuremberg laws, meaning that if you could have been persecuted as a Jew during the Shoah, during the Holocaust, then you are eligible to make Aliyah. So it's not a halachic status, but rather it's a legal status of having at least one Jewish parent or a Jewish grandparent, or having converted to Judaism. So what we do at Nefesh BeNefesh is we work with Chok HaShvut, and we assist people making Aliyah. We assist them with Aliyah process, because Aliyah means gaining citizenship. There is documentation that needs to be organized. And there's also the interview process to be approved. But most importantly, we're here to provide guidance as far as your Aliyah planning. And what I do at Nefesh BeNefesh is I assist people with their research when they're looking at different community possibilities. If people want to look at a community that is appropriate for them, whether it's urban or it's rural, or hashkafically what is most appropriate for them. So that is my task at Nefesh BeNefesh.
So thank you for that, Eli. So you're saying that if we wanted to create a hill with all Syrian Jews on top, you would help us with making that possible.
Be'ezrat Hashem.
Okay. So first of all, I want to make sure that everybody understands that if you have questions for Eli, I will be moderating them. You could put them in the chat now. We only have a few minutes for this talk, but as I said, there'll be more in the future. So if you have questions specifically for Eli, please put it in the chat and I'll choose which ones we should ask and ask it. Eli, can you describe the basic process of applying for Aliyah?
Okay, so what I would say is that even before somebody wants to apply for Aliyah, I think you first need to make sure that this is what you want to do, because this is a big move. So I wouldn't submit an Aliyah application until I felt that I had a tentative timeline of up to 12 months before my potential Aliyah. Okay, so I would want to make sure that this is something that I want to do. And I would go to the Nefesh BeNefesh website. I've actually put the URL in the chat, nbn.org.il. And on the upper right-hand side, there is a menu item that says apply. And it's an online questionnaire. It takes about 25 minutes to fill out. And what it does is that it opens up a file for Aliyah with Nefesh BeNefesh and with the Jewish agency. And we share a common database. And when a person does that, we assign to them an Aliyah advisor who becomes their go-to person for any questions that they have about Aliyah process or Aliyah planning.
Great, great. One of the questions that was asked is the following. I'm going to read it. I'm looking to obtain citizenship. However, I maintain my primary residence in America. What are the tax ramifications and potential army complications for my family?
Okay. So first of all, the main objective of Nefesh BeNefesh is to assist people make Aliyah. And Aliyah is not just to obtain citizenship, but is also to live in Eretz Yisrael. For somebody who is looking to obtain citizenship and only citizenship without necessarily living in Israel, I would say, first of all, regarding questions of taxation, it's important to speak with an accountant. But you should know that Israeli law requires a person to pay taxes in Israel if you are a resident. So if you are not a resident, meaning that Israel is not the center of your life, so then that should not necessarily be a problem as far as taxation. Regarding the army, is that if you are not living in Israel and your children, there are plenty of Israelis or former Israelis who are currently living in the United States and whose children come and visit the country and are not required to serve in the IDF as long as they're able to prove that they are not currently living in Israel. And that's basically how it goes. But I'd like to say that it is a zchut to serve in the IDF. And I had that fortune of doing so 30 years ago. And that was how I fell in love with Israel, by being together with my friends from Yeshiva in the first Hesder unit in Golani. And I have the zchut now as a parent that my son is in a special forces unit in Golani. And I highly recommend for somebody who wants to connect to Israel and to love Israelis, if you are of age, the IDF is a definite way to do so.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because Rabbi David Zeit was on earlier today. His two sons are commandos in two groups, one in the new Ghost unit, and he gave a whole explanation of what that is. Somebody asked the question, which I also have myself, is how do you pick a place to live in Israel without living there? So, in other words, you're the community advisor. How does one even look when I want to go on, let's say, a map of Israel, and I'm thinking about making Aliyah? How do I even pick an area to think about moving into when I don't know the neighborhood and I don't know the neighbors?
Right. So that's an excellent question. There is nothing that can replace your own personal experience. We recommend that people make a pilot trip and make as many visits to Israel as possible for the purpose of researching community. Not just when you come on a family visit to visit with family, but rather to look at community as if, this is potentially a place where you may want to live. And then, it's important to ask yourselves, what are your priorities in choosing a community? For example, as I had mentioned previously, are you looking for an urban environment or a rural environment? Are you looking for a community that has many English speakers, that has some English speakers, or are you looking to integrate entirely into an Israeli environment? Are you looking for a religiously diverse community, or are you looking for a community which is more homogeneous and similar to your own personal hashkafa? Do you know that, do you have a specific profession which is geographically based out of the center of the country, or are you flexible to go to other places? So, these are the questions to begin to ask yourself, and to ask us at Nefesh BeNefesh, and then based on your answers, we can then recommend specific communities that we feel meet your criteria.
Fantastic. Someone asks, how does one go about getting a passport, an Israeli passport, and if there are benefits or downsides to getting that passport?
Okay, so first of all, there is no process of naturalization when you make Aliyah. When you get pre-approved by the Jewish agency and you have your Aliyah visa from the Israeli consulate, when you arrive in Israel, you are a full-blown citizen, okay? There's no waiting to be naturalized, okay? To the point where you even register for health insurance at the airport so that you're covered immediately. Now, there are just some technical issues that it usually takes about 3 months until you can get your Israeli passport. But that's not a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Someone asked, a young person asked, who happened to know, is what are the in terms of job opportunities, what view do Israeli companies have from American-grown workers in corporate Israel?
Okay. So first of all, Israelis love American-trained workers. The work ethic, the experience, it's something which is very, very significant. It's important to note that pre-corona, Israel was at its lowest for unemployment ever. It was just under 5%. Unfortunately now, with Corona and a lot of the different requirements to keep certain businesses closed, unemployment is at its highest. And we hope, Ezra Hashem, in the coming months, things will be under control and we'll be able to move back closer to where we were before. But Israel is growing by leaps and bounds. There's tremendous bracha. As the previous Zoom speaker, spoke about what you see today in Eretz Yisrael, it's unbelievable. Okay, the people in my community, when they bought their homes 20 years ago, never believed that their property would appreciate more than 330%. Okay, I mean, that's who could have imagined? Who could have imagined? Hazorim bedima berina yiktsoru. In other words, if you want to be part of, so you got to come and be part of.
Happens to be, Ellie, that Hazuraim BeAb is the tagline of today's program on our website. Someone asked, and there's a lot of questions coming through, so and I'm sorry that they're not organized in by group. How long does the Aliyah process take generally?
Okay, so once all of the required documents are gathered, the process usually, for under most circumstances, takes about 3 to 4 months. Okay, the issue of gathering the documents, that now is a little bit of a challenge because of the COVID situation and the ability to get some of these documents. But what's been happening now is that it's been taking people between 4 to 5 months to gather the documents. So I would say that if somebody is interested in making Aliyah within the next year, now is a good time to start. But when times are good and documents are forthcoming, or if you already have the documents, so it can be done relatively quickly, and I hope that we'll be able to cut down that 3 to 4 month once the documents have been collected.
Right. So connected to that question, I have this question here. I'm going to read it directly. If I complete the Aliyah application and fly to Israel to pick up my ID card, I understand I need to wait 90 days to apply for a passport. Do I need to remain in the country for all that time?
In order to receive a passport, to the best of my knowledge, you need to be in Israel. Now, there for a period of 90 days. Now, there is no requirement to stay in Israel. In other words, the day after you make Aliyah, you can fly abroad. However, you need to be in Israel for a 3-month period in order to apply for your passport.
Mm-hmm. Can you apply for an Israeli passport without going through the Aliyah process yet? That's actually one of my personal questions.
So the question is, what do you call Aliyah? When we at Nefesh BeNefesh call Aliyah is acquiring citizenship. Okay, so when you acquire citizenship, you are entitled to a passport.
So I think the questioner wants to know, can they be a dual citizen without living in Israel? And
of course. Of course. In other words, there is no problem to maintain additional citizenship. Just like my children who have not lived in the United States, they have U.S. citizenship as well. You usually pass on citizenship one generation, but yes, you can maintain dual citizenship. Absolutely.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about real estate. A lot of people want to know, what does it cost to get an entry level something? We come from the community in New York. Thank God, many of us have good jobs, even if they're teachers, and they want to know.
Teaching is the best job.
I'm not sure in Israel we could get jobs in Israel being teachers, but what does an apartment that could fit a family, let's say of 6, or a house of 6? What are the rates that are going rates in Israel right now?
Okay, so everything is location, 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 and somebody who wants to live in Yerushalayim, you can probably compare the cost of living to somebody who's living in Manhattan. For that reason, communities such as Beit Shemesh evolved because people wanted to live close to, but we're looking for something a little bit more affordable. I would say that for pretty much anywhere in the center of the country, for an apartment that has at least 3 bedrooms, okay, so and I'm not talking about a house, I'm just talking about an apartment, okay, you're talking about 1,300,000 shekel, okay, and if you're talking about a private home, not semi-attached, but a freestanding home, so then you're already talking about 3.5 million shekel in the center of the country.
So everybody get out your calculators and multiple.
Three and a half is already more than $1 million.
So right. Okay. Thank you. A question that some people are asking are: many of us have advanced degrees in America, whether it's in teaching, doctor, lawyers, mental healthcare professionals, and we've worked for many, many years to get those degrees. Or I see younger people in the process of getting those degrees now. Do they transfer automatically to Israel so they could get jobs there? Is there a process of transition where we have to retake all exams? And can you enlighten us, please?
Okay, so it depends on the profession. In other words, there are professions which require licensing, and there are professions where it is the common custom to have a specific degree. If you are in a profession that requires licensing, there's a lot of information on the Nefesh BeNefesh website in our professions index, where you can actually learn the details about the licensing requirements. If you are working in the private sector and you're not in a field which requires licensing, so that for the most part, you don't need to have your degrees recognized. When would you need to have your degrees recognized? Only if you're working in the public sector. The public sector has requirements where you would need to have your degrees submitted to the Ministry of Education, Misrad HaChinuch, and then they would recognize your degrees, and that is important for salary scale, for pay scale.
I realize now that we're all talking in English, but we're talking about a country who's run in the Hebrew language. How hard is it to do this entire process through Nefesh BeNefesh and the what you call it, the Misrad, in order to get the citizenship? How hard is it to be an English-speaking person to navigate all of the websites and all of the processes in order to finally get the passport and become an Ole?
Okay, so in order to navigate the process and to achieve Israeli citizenship, you do not need Hebrew. That is exactly what Nefesh BeNefesh is here to facilitate. We have translated everything. We hold your hand every step of the way. We explain everything. You don't need Hebrew for the Aliyah process, but it's highly recommended that you do learn Hebrew for living in Israel. It is the spoken language. So there are plenty of places where you can get by in English, right? In Ramat Beit Shemesh, where I live, you'll probably hear more English spoken on the street than you will Hebrew, and I'm not kidding. Okay. That being said, Israel is not Ramat Beit Shemesh, and learning Hebrew is extremely important if you want to integrate into Israeli society, and if you want to open up all of Israel for your family, for your children, so that they can then find jobs, and that they can have friends, and they can experience everything that living in a Jewish society has to offer, above and beyond just living in a community.
I'm aware that there are certain tax benefits for being an Ole. I've heard about that. You get certain benefits throughout the process, especially if you buy a house. I believe there's some tax benefits. What if the person purchases a house, becomes an Ole, but really maintains his residence, primary residence in the United States of America?
Okay, so what I would say is I don't want to get into the specifics of the tax benefit, and you should definitely consult with a real estate lawyer about the legalities. We have a lot of information on our website. One of the most important tools for Aliyah is Google. Okay, and you type in Nefesh BeNefesh and the topic that you want to research. So for instance, what you're talking about is the purchase tax. Okay, so what you can do is you can type that into Google, and the words Nefesh BeNefesh purchase tax, and you'll have all of the information at your fingertips.
Fantastic. A few more questions, and then our time is going to be over. This is a big question, which I'm not sure you're comfortable answering. I was on the SCA has Baruch Hashem, a lot of guest speakers. One of our main guest speakers gave a class a few months ago. I think it was on Yom HaAtzmaut. And one of the questions he was asked was, what does the Syrian community look like in Israel of the Syrians who made Aliyah to Israel so far to date? Is it, I see Lenore raising her hand, thank you. She is one of our heroes. Just to let everybody know, in Barkai, when you walk into the main office, I have a wall called Giburei Barkai, the heroes of Barkai. And who are the heroes of Barkai? They are the members of the Barkai family who have made Aliyah over the last 21 years of our institution. And we're so happy because those are really the people who are able to have the brave spirit to do what we all pray for 3 times a day. The question that was asked to him, and I want to see if you have a similar answer or not, was what happens to the Syrians when they make Aliyah? Do they stay together or do they assimilate into society? Is it better for us to plan a unified exit and entry a la Rabbi Riskin, or is it better to come in and find our own spaces to integrate in?
That's a fantastic question.
We only have 4 minutes.
4 minutes. I love Rabbi Riskin. Okay, he was my Rosh Yeshiva when I studied my year in Israel. And even though he helped create the city of Efrat, there were not more than 10 families that joined him when he started. Okay, the Syrian community is a beautiful community in Chutz La'aretz, in Brooklyn, in Deal. I don't feel that there's yet critical mass of that community in Israel. There are people from the Syrian community in different places. But somebody has to be the Nachshon ben Abinadav that then comes and helps create that community in Israel, and they will help bring others. And Be'ezrat Hashem, the people who are today in this Zoom are going to be those who are going to be taking action and will be creating that community.
Well, thank you. I want to thank Nefesh BeNefesh. I want to thank Mr. Eli Bialik. I want to thank Michael Hidary for helping make this happen, and for sure SVA, the Sephardic Community Alliance, for putting this together. I really hope personally that you email me, rabbimoseshaber@gmail.com. I want to make sure that we can have more events like this, digging more into the details to answer the questions, to make people as comfortable as they could be in order to pull the trigger, to be those Nachshon ben Abinadav according to the Midrash. Thank you, Eli, for staying up so late for us. We really appreciate it, and we hope to speak to you very soon. Have a Teskub and a Hamat Zion.